We don't touch in my culture, but I need you to stay with me tonight. First Contact Protocol. The meditation chamber hummed with a frequency that made Lieutenant Marcus Webb's teeth ache. 3 months aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony had taught him to recognize the subtle differences in alien technology, but the Zephyrian ship still felt like stepping into a living organism. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns responding to every breath and heartbeat of its occupants. Marcus stood at attention as the airlock cycled, his diplomatic uniform crisp despite the journey through hyperspace. The Unity Council had chosen him for this mission not because of his military record, but because of his psychological profile. Patient, observant, someone who could build bridges instead of burning them. The airlock opened with a whisper, revealing a figure that defied every xenobiological report he had studied. HFY emerged from the blue-tinted atmosphere of her ship, moving with a grace that seemed to bend gravity itself. Her skin held the deep purple of twilight skies, marked with silver patterns that shifted like living constellations. 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, each gesture deliberate and meaningful. "Human Marcus Webb," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his chest. "I am HFY of the Third Resonance. Your arrival creates ripples in the song of space." Marcus had practiced this moment 1,000 times, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of her presence. Her eyes held depths that seemed older than stars, and when she looked at him, he felt evaluated not just as a representative of humanity, but as something infinitely more complex. "Ambassador HFY," he replied, offering the formal bow the cultural briefings had specified. "Thank you for accepting our request for dialogue. The Human Federation hopes this marks the beginning of a lasting partnership." Something flickered across her features, an expression too quick to interpret. She gestured with 2 of her hands, indicating the chamber beyond. "Come. We have much to discuss, and the song of understanding requires time to compose." The weeks that followed blurred together in a symphony of cultural exchange. HFY proved to be unlike any alien Marcus had encountered in the training simulations. She asked questions that cut straight to the heart of human nature, challenging assumptions he had never thought to examine. "Your species fights constantly," she observed one evening as they reviewed trade agreements. "Yet you also sacrifice everything for strangers. How do you reconcile such contradiction?" Marcus paused in his data analysis, considering her words. "Maybe the contradiction is the point. We fight because we care. We care because we know what it means to lose something precious." HFY's patterns shifted to deeper blues. What he had learned indicated contemplation. "Your emotional responses create chaos in your decision matrices. My people eliminated such variables long ago." "And what did you gain from that?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Efficiency, harmony, peace." Her 4 hands moved in a complex gesture. "But watching you these past weeks, I begin to wonder what we lost." The breakthrough came during their 15th day together. Marcus had been struggling with a translation of human poetry, trying to convey the concept of longing to a species that had systematically removed such feelings from their psychological makeup. "Why do humans create art about pain?" HFY asked, her patterns cycling through confused yellows and greens. Marcus set down his tablet and looked directly at her, something that had taken weeks to feel natural. "Because pain means we're alive. It means we care enough about something to hurt when it's gone. Your people eliminated suffering, but did they eliminate joy too?" For the first time since their meeting, HFY's patterns went completely still. In the silence that followed, Marcus realized he might have crossed an invisible line, violated some cultural taboo he had not been warned about. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We call it the empty peace. Perfect harmony. Perfect order. Perfect nothing." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to build, connecting 2 species across an impossible gulf of difference. The resonance between Worlds, the observation deck, had become their unofficial meeting place, a neutral space where the stars provided a backdrop for increasingly personal conversations. Marcus found himself looking forward to these moments, when the formal protocols dissolved and something more authentic emerged between them. HFY had taken to dimming her ship's internal lighting during these sessions, her patterns more visible in the artificial twilight. Tonight they pulsed with deep purples and soft silvers, colors Marcus had learned indicated a contemplative mood. "Your sleep cycles fascinate me," she said, settling into a position that might have been sitting if she had been human. "Every night you surrender consciousness voluntarily. Your species evolved to trust in the vulnerability of dreams." Marcus leaned against the transparent aluminum viewing port, watching distant nebulae drift past. "We don't really have a choice. Our brains need that downtime to process everything we experience during the day. But you dream," HFY pressed. "Your minds create entire realities from memory and imagination. My people simply cease. We power down our consciousness and restart 8 hours later with perfect efficiency." "Doesn't sound very restful," Marcus observed. HFY's patterns shifted to something he had never seen before, a complex interweaving of colors that seemed almost wistful. "I have begun to wonder what dreams might feel like, to experience stories that exist only in the space between waking and sleeping." The conversation continued late into the ship's night cycle, touching on subjects that had nothing to do with trade agreements or diplomatic protocols. Marcus found himself sharing memories of Earth, describing the feeling of rain on skin and the way music could make a person cry for no logical reason. In return, HFY spoke of the collective harmony, the psychic network that connected all Zephyrians. She described it as a constant background hum of shared consciousness, where individual thoughts merged into a greater symphony of purpose. "But sometimes," she admitted, her voice dropping to barely audible levels, "I disconnect from the harmony. I float in the silence of my own thoughts, and I wonder what it would be like to be truly alone with my own mind." Marcus understood more than she might have expected. Humans spend most of our lives feeling alone, even in crowds. Maybe that's why we're so desperate to connect with each other. We know what isolation feels like. Yet your art, your literature, your music, they all speak of longing for solitude, for individual identity separate from the group. "We want what we don't have," Marcus said simply. "It's probably our greatest weakness and our greatest strength." The days that followed brought a subtle shift in their interactions. HFY began asking more personal questions, not about humanity as a species, but about Marcus as an individual. She wanted to know about his childhood, his fears, his hopes for the future. In return, she began to reveal cracks in the perfect facade of Zephyrian culture. She spoke of young ones who struggled to connect with the harmony, individuals who felt out of sync with the collective consciousness. She described her own moments of doubt, times when the unified purpose of her people felt suffocating rather than comforting. "There are others like me," she confessed one evening. "Zephyrians who question the empty peace, who wonder if we sacrifice too much in our pursuit of perfection. But such thoughts are discouraged." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. What happens to those who voice these doubts? HFY's patterns went dark for several seconds. They are helped to remember their place in the harmony. The individual dissolves back into the collective and the questions fade. The weight of her admission settled between them. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a crack in the foundation of an entire civilization. And somehow their time together had been the catalyst for HFY's awakening. "Is that why you accepted this diplomatic mission?" he asked. "To experience something outside the harmony?" "Perhaps," she replied, "or perhaps the harmony itself guided me here, knowing that contact with your chaotic, emotional species might serve some greater purpose I cannot yet comprehend." They sat in comfortable silence after that, two beings from incompatible worlds, finding common ground in their mutual questioning of the systems that had shaped them, boundaries of understanding. The crisis began during their third week together, when HFY collapsed during what should have been a routine cultural exchange session. Marcus found her on the floor of the conference room, her patterns flickering, erratically between colors that hurt to look at directly. "The harmony," she gasped, her 4 arms pressed against her head. "It's calling me back. The elders have noticed my deviation." Marcus knelt beside her, every instinct screaming to offer physical comfort. But the cultural briefings had been clear. Zephyrians considered unexpected touch a form of assault, a violation of personal space that could trigger violent defensive responses. "What can I do?" he asked, helpless in the face of her obvious distress. "Nothing," she whispered. "This is what happens when an individual consciousness drifts too far from the collective. The harmony pulls it back, forcibly if necessary." Marcus watched her struggle, her patterns cycling through what he now recognized as pain, fear, and something that might have been grief. The perfect diplomat in him knew he should contact the Unity Council, report this development, and request immediate extraction. But the human in him couldn't abandon someone who was clearly suffering. "Fight it," he said quietly. Kethavi's eyes focused on him with surprising clarity. "What? You said there were others like you, Zephyrians who questioned the system. What if this is your chance to break free completely? What if instead of being pulled back into the harmony, you chose to step outside it entirely?" "Impossible," she breathed. "No Zephyrian has ever existed independently of the collective consciousness. We would die without the harmony's guidance." "Humans exist independently every day," Marcus pointed out. "We make our own choices, think our own thoughts, create our own purposes. It's terrifying and wonderful, and completely chaotic, but we survive." Kethavi's patterns shifted to something he had never seen before, a brilliant white shot through with gold. Hope, he realized. She was feeling hope. "The pain is lessening," she said with wonder, as if the act of considering independence has created some kind of buffer against the harmony's pull. Over the following hours, Marcus watched Kethavi undergo a transformation that defied everything he knew about Zephyrian biology. Her connection to the collective consciousness didn't sever cleanly, but rather frayed gradually, like an old rope under stress. With each passing hour, she became more herself, and less a reflection of her species' collective will. Her patterns became more vibrant, more individual, expressing emotions and thoughts that belonged to her alone. "I can feel it happening," she said during the worst of the process. "The harmony is receding and I'm becoming separate. It should terrify me, but instead I feel alive," Marcus suggested. "Yes," she whispered. "Alive in a way I never knew was possible. But freedom came with a price. Cut off from the collective consciousness that had guided every aspect of her existence, Kethavi found herself overwhelmed by the sheer weight of individual choice. Every decision, from what to eat to how to respond to Marcus's questions, required conscious thought instead of collective consensus. "How do humans function like this?" she asked, after spending 10 minutes trying to decide which datapad to review first. "Every moment requires hundreds of tiny choices. It's exhausting." Marcus laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine understanding. "We don't even notice most of them anymore. It becomes automatic after a while. But you're right. Consciousness is exhausting. That's why we need sleep, why we need dreams, why we need each other." As the days passed, Kethavi began to adapt to her new independence. Her patterns, once limited to the prescribed emotional expressions of her species, began to develop new combinations and intensities. She laughed for the first time, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She cried, her tears bioluminescent traces of grief for the connection she had lost. "I cannot return to my people," she realized one evening. "They would see my independence as a disease to be cured, a malfunction to be corrected." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. By encouraging her transformation, he had effectively made her an exile from her own species. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't realize what I was asking you to give up." Kethavi's patterns cycled through several emotions before settling on something warm and golden. Do not apologize for helping me discover who I am beneath the collective identity. For the first time in my existence, my thoughts are truly my own. The space between worlds. The message from the Zephyrian High Council arrived exactly 27 days after Kethavi's separation from the Harmony. Marcus watched her patterns shift to deep, troubled purples as she listened to the formal declaration that cut through both of their hearts. Ambassador Kethavi of the Third Resonance, the translated message intoned, "You have been declared discordant and are hereby severed from all rights and recognitions of Zephyrian citizenship. Your actions have introduced chaos into the perfect order, and you are no longer welcome in Harmony space." The communication ended with the clinical efficiency typical of Zephyrian official pronouncements, but Marcus could see the devastating impact it had on Kethavi. Her patterns flickered between colors that spoke of loss, grief, and something that might have been relief. "I expected this," she said quietly, settling into what had become her preferred meditation position. But expecting pain does not make it hurt less when it arrives. Marcus moved closer, still respecting the physical boundaries that governed their relationship, but offering what comfort his presence could provide. "You're not alone," he said. "The Unity Council has already approved asylum status for you. You have a place with us if you want it." Kethavi's patterns shifted to surprised golds and warm ambers. "Your people would accept someone like me? An exile, a broken piece of another species' machinery." "You're not broken," Marcus said firmly. "You're evolved. You've become something new, something that bridges the gap between collective harmony and individual choice. That's not a flaw, it's a breakthrough." The conversation that followed stretched long into the ship's night cycle. Kethavi spoke of her fears about living among humans, about trying to build an identity from nothing but her own choices and desires. Marcus shared his own struggles with belonging, his memories of growing up feeling different from his peers, never quite fitting into the expected patterns of human social interaction. "Perhaps," Kethavi mused, "we are both outsiders in our own ways, you among humans, me now among everyone. Maybe that's why we understand each other," Marcus suggested. "We both know what it's like to stand at the edges of belonging." As the days passed, their relationship deepened in ways that transcended the original diplomatic mission. They created new protocols for their interactions, finding ways to express care and support that honored both their cultural backgrounds and their growing personal connection. Kethavi began to experiment with human customs, asking Marcus to teach her about concepts like friendship, loyalty, and love. In return, she shared the meditation techniques of her people, showing him how to find peace in the space between thoughts. "In the Harmony," she explained during one of these sessions, "individual consciousness was seen as noise that interfered with the collective signal. But being with you, I'm learning that the noise itself can be beautiful. Your chaos creates patterns I never imagined possible." Marcus felt something shift inside him at her words, a recognition that went deeper than diplomatic cooperation or even friendship. "Kethavi," he said carefully, "in human culture, when two people care about each other the way we do, we have a word for it." Her patterns brightened with curiosity. "What word?" "Love," he said simply. The silence that followed felt charged with possibility. Kethavi's patterns cycled through a dozen different colors before settling on something Marcus had never seen, before a deep warm resonance that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat. "Love," she repeated, testing the word like a new flavor. "A bond that exists by choice rather than biological imperative. A connection that grows stronger through individual will rather than collective programming." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. Kethavi moved closer then, closer than she had ever dared before, still not touching, but near enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her bioluminescent patterns. "Marcus of the humans," she said formally, "I believe I am experiencing this love you describe. But my people's customs forbid physical contact. We express deep connection through the sharing of consciousness, mind touching mind rather than body touching body." Marcus felt his heart racing at the implications. Are you asking if I would be willing to try that kind of connection? I am asking, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If you would be willing to let me touch your thoughts the way you have taught me to touch my own emotions. To bridge the space between our worlds not with bodies, but with minds. The weight of her request settled between them. Marcus realized she was offering him something unprecedented, a form of intimacy that no human had ever experienced. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely outside any protocol either of their species had ever conceived. Yes, he said, without hesitation. Yes, I want to know you that completely. Part 5. Touching without touch. The preparation took 3 days. Kethvi explained that consciousness sharing required careful mental conditioning, a gradual opening of defensive barriers that protected individual thoughts from outside influence. For humans, who had never developed such psychic abilities, the process was entirely theoretical. I don't know if this will work, she admitted as they sat facing each other in the ship's meditation chamber. Human neural patterns are so different from Zephyrian consciousness structures. But if we can bridge that gap, we'll be the first, Marcus finished. 2 people from impossible worlds finding a way to truly know each other. Kethvi's patterns pulsed with nervous anticipation, colors shifting between excitement and fear. In my culture, this level of mental intimacy is reserved for life bonding, a connection that transcends individual existence. Once minds have truly touched, they remain linked across time and distance. Marcus felt the gravity of what she was offering. Are you sure this is what you want? Once we do this, there's no going back to being just diplomatic partners. There has been no just between us for weeks, she replied, her patterns settling into determined golds and deep purples. What we have built together already transcends the original mission parameters. This is simply making the connection official. The process began with synchronized breathing, Marcus following Kethvi's guidance as she taught him to quiet the constant chatter of human consciousness. It was harder than he had expected, his mind rebelling against the unfamiliar. Discipline required to achieve the necessary mental state. Don't fight your thoughts, Kethvi instructed, her voice taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in his neural pathways. Let them flow through you like water through a stream. Observe without judgment, feel without attachment. Gradually, Marcus felt something shifting in his awareness. The boundaries of his individual consciousness began to feel less solid, more permeable. He could sense Kethvi's presence not as a separate being in the room, but as a warm intelligence, hovering at the edges of his own mind. Now, she whispered, and Marcus felt rather than heard her voice inside his thoughts. The contact was gentle at first, a tentative brush of alien consciousness against his own. Marcus experienced a moment of vertigo as his perspective suddenly expanded to include sensations and emotions that weren't his own. He could feel Kethvi's wonder at experiencing human thought patterns, her amazement at the chaotic beauty of individual consciousness, unguided by collective will. But then the connection deepened and Marcus found himself experiencing memory and emotion that belonged entirely to her. He saw her childhood in the collective, felt her early questions about the nature of individual identity, experienced her growing sense of isolation as she began to drift away from the harmony. In return, she experienced his memories of Earth, his struggles with belonging, his deep-seated fear of being truly known by another person. She felt his wonder at meeting her, his growing love, his terror at the thought of losing this impossible connection they had built. You see me? Kethvi's thoughts whispered through his consciousness. Not as a representative of my species, or a diplomatic partner, but as myself, as an individual consciousness worthy of love and understanding. And you accept me? Marcus responded through the link. All my chaos and contradiction and emotional noise. You find beauty in the very things that make me feel alien among my own people. The sharing continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. They exchanged not just thoughts and memories, but the fundamental experience of being themselves. Marcus felt what it was like to exist as part of a collective consciousness, to have every decision guided by the will of thousands. Cathy experienced the terrifying freedom of making choices based solely on individual desire and judgment. When the connection finally began to fade, both of them were left changed by the experience. Marcus could still feel an echo of Cathy's presence in the back of his mind, a warm certainty that they were now linked in ways that transcended physical proximity. "We don't touch in my culture," Cathy said softly, her patterns pulsing with colors that spoke of deep satisfaction and lasting bond. "But I need you to stay with me tonight. Not in body, but in the connection we have just created." Marcus smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. "In my culture, we call this sleeping together even when we're not actually touching. The sharing of vulnerable space, the trust of unconscious presence." "Then let us sleep together in the way of both our peoples," Cathy replied. "Mind linked to mind, consciousness connected across the space between our worlds." As the ship's lights dimmed for the night cycle, they settled into their respective rest positions, still not touching physically but connected by something far deeper than skin contact could ever provide. Marcus closed his eyes and felt Cathy's presence settle into his thoughts like a warm blanket. For the first time since leaving Earth, he was not alone with his dreams. And somewhere in the gentle hum of the ship's engines and the distant song of stars, two impossible lovers found peace in the space they had created between their worlds. The Unity Council would eventually classify their relationship as the first successful interspecies consciousness bond in recorded history. But that night, as they drifted toward sleep with their minds still gently intertwined, Marcus and Cathy were simply two beings who had found a way to love across every barrier the universe had placed between them.